If you've ever seen the show Atlanta on FX, then you know it's one of the most creative and groundbreaking shows of the last 20 years or so. In one of the episodes of Atlanta, Earn, who is a character played by Donald Glover, asks a man who's making a Nutella sandwich if some people are just supposed to lose.
I just keep losing. I mean, some people just supposed to lose.
Becoming an adult is learning that, yes, some people are supposed to lose. That's sort of what the system is built on, the backs of losing people. Becoming an adult is also learning that it is more likely than not that you will be one of those losing people. Hi, my name is Azaria. I am nearly $100,000 in student loan debt, and for some reason I'm still in school in Nebraska. I think it's Stockholm Syndrome at this point. In this video, I wanted to sort of go over my journey in higher education, and I wanted to talk about some of the regrets that I absolutely have and some things that I wouldn't change for the world. So I graduated from high school in 2014. I went to school in Hampton Roads, Virginia. I was supposed to go to college in 2014 in the fall semester. I was supposed to go to Marymount Manhattan College in New York. I put my deposit down. My mom and my best friend at the time, we went up to New York to visit the school, see the campus. Everyone there was really nice, but it didn't feel like the right fit for me. It was very far away, which was something that I wanted to do. I wanted to go to college further away, and it was in New York specifically, which is another place that I saw myself moving to. When you're a writer, you hear that writers are making it in New York and California, and so that's typically where you want to go. Because it's so inexpensive to film in Georgia, there are also a lot of writers in and around Atlanta, but when I was growing up, it was really New York, LA. So I was really excited to be able to move to New York, but it just didn't feel right. It didn't feel right to me, and so I ended up deferring. The whole time that I was deferring, I intended to find a decent paying job so that I could set myself up for success. I planned to defer for an entire year, and then I would start in fall of 2015 as a freshman. The problem that I quickly ran into was that no one was willing to pay me more than $7.50 an hour. Granted, I did just graduate high school. I didn't have any work experience, but I knew people at my school that were getting paid $11 an hour while still in school, $12 an hour while still in school. It's clear to me now that those people had connections that they were working in order to get those jobs. Back then, it didn't seem like that because no one was being upfront about the fact that they were using their family connection to get these higher paying jobs. When I found out that I was only going to be able to make $7.50, maybe $8 at the most, I decided that I would go to school in the spring of 2015. And that sort of extinguished my writing dream as it was. I had this idea of getting up in the morning in New York, going to a coffee shop or a bodega or something like that, grabbing some food, writing with my peers, my cool, like chic peers, but that didn't come to fruition. I'll also mention that Marymount Manhattan College was asking for way too much money. I would have had to take out a student loan for, I want to say, $20,000 just for my first year at the university. Just wasn't feasible. I ended up going to Lynchburg College in January of 2015. It's now called the University of Lynchburg, but it's the same school. I was an English major with minors in creative writing and secondary education. I planned to be a high school teacher when I graduated. Like I said, my writing dreams at the time were really extinguished, and so I was like, let's make this work. Let's do what's possible for me. I was really involved in clubs when I was in undergrad. I was in like every club. I was in honor societies. I essentially did everything except for Greek life, and that's because I couldn't afford it. I couldn't afford the dues, and my social life was so rigorous because of clubs, not because I was making organic friendships, but it was so rigorous because of clubs that I really didn't have time to pledge or anything like that. And it just honestly wasn't interesting to me, but I literally did everything else. I quickly became sort of one of the favorite students in the creative writing program. And because of that, I got a lot of opportunities to meet one-on-one with really famous writers. I got to meet Joy Harjo, Tim Siebels, and Nikki Finney. Nikki Finney is still like the writer that I am the happiest that I met. Of course, I also met some really great professors that I still keep in touch with, that write me letters of recommendation, that send me sort of open calls or calls for submissions, stuff like that. And I'm really happy about that, because without that sort of formal education laying the groundwork for me and meeting these people and networking, I don't think I would have been able to foster my love for reading and writing as much as if I was still making, a quarter above minimum wage, struggling to make ends meet. I graduated from the University of Lynchburg in 2018. Throughout the entirety of the spring semester of my senior year, I was applying to MFA programs. I applied to the MFA program at UVA, the one at Randolph College. I applied to the one at Hollins University, and I actually got waitlisted for that one, I believe. I applied to several programs and I didn't get into any of them, and it was really, really discouraging for me. It's one of those big fish, small pond things. Like I said, I kind of became one of the top students in our creative writing program, but like looking back at my writing from this time, I wasn't ready for an MFA program. It just wasn't, my writing wasn't there yet. So I ended up taking 2 years off. For some of the first year, I was still in Virginia, sleeping on my friend's couch, working at a retirement home. At the retirement home, I made $10.50 an hour as a recent college graduate with an English degree. I really tried to get administrative assistant positions, office assistant positions. Because of my work on campus, I had a lot of experience doing clerical work, but it just wasn't happening for me. And so I was making $10.50 as a dining server in a retirement home. Eventually, I applied to the AmeriCorps VISTA program, and VISTA stands for Volunteers in Service to America. The AmeriCorps program is essentially a volunteer program. There are tons of sort of different threads. There's the NCCC program, which might have gotten discontinued. There's the VISTA program. There's the senior program, the summer program. There's a literacy program. There are all kinds of different AmeriCorps programs, and AmeriCorps also partners with certain nonprofits in certain places in order to offer unique programming. And so essentially what you do in the AmeriCorps program is you dedicate yourself to a certain amount of service. My service was an entire year. You get paid a very small amount during that time. And the idea is that you are serving those less fortunate, and in order to relate to those people as much as possible, they pay you the same amount that those people are making on average. When I was in AmeriCorps, I was working full-time in a nonprofit, and that was my AmeriCorps position. And then I was working about 20 hours a week at a local restaurant. Of course, like I said, this was in 2020, so this was right around the time when COVID hit, and we all sort of took a hit. We weren't getting paid as much from part-time jobs. We weren't getting any additional help from AmeriCorps. Things were really difficult. At the end of your AmeriCorps term, at least in the VISTA program, you have two different options for additional compensation. So your first option is what's called an education award. And the education award, I believe, is between like $6,000 and $7,000. And they send that money directly to whatever higher education institution that you input the information for. And then the other option for compensation is just money, and it's about $4,000 to $5,000. And so most people usually choose the education award. It's kind of like more bang for your buck, and usually people use AmeriCorps as a kind of stepping stone between them and higher education, or between them and a career at a larger nonprofit. So I ended up going to Butler University in Indianapolis, Indiana, because that's where I was placed to do my service for AmeriCorps, and I got my MFA in fiction there. As a student, I was way less involved in the MFA program. It really just seemed like a sort of nuisance at that point. The campus was a 20-minute drive from where I lived in Indianapolis, a 30-minute drive during rush hour. And for that very first year, we were all distance learning because of COVID. So the sort of community sense of togetherness wasn't really there for me, and I didn't really feel drawn to participate in on-campus activities. I was also working full-time at the nonprofit where I did my service. So they sort of hired me on full-time for a very low wage, mind you. I wasn't getting paid very much. I accepted it because I needed a job. And I'm still very grateful that they offered me one, but I was getting paid nothing. And I was the lowest paid staff member. Butler had some great things going for it. They have Booth, which is a literary magazine. It's pretty popular. They offered funding and opportunities for you to attend conferences, things like that. They also had a service requirement, which I didn't see in other MFA programs. And for the service requirement, you could participate in the writing camp that they host every summer for youth. You could be like a counselor. You could be a tutor through a partnership that they had with Indianapolis Public Schools. There were a few different ways that you could get in your service, and I ended up being a writing tutor. I also think that Indy had a pretty vibrant arts community. If you don't know, there's an event called Butter that happens out of Indianapolis every year, and it's run by a company called Gang Gang. It's like an art festival. A lot of artists come and exhibit their work, sell their work, things like that. There were a lot of opportunities for artists to sell their work at sort of like local community bazaars. There were a lot of open mic events, a lot of sort of gallery events that invited writers. The artist community was pretty great. It was really hard for me to infiltrate that sort of artist group, and I still don't think I did it very successfully. I don't want to call the artist community there cliquey, because I don't think that's it. But you do have to really hunt around and actually attend events and meet people. Sort of doing things all online, it wasn't very beneficial for me. And sort of right before I moved to Nebraska, I had started to kind of infiltrate that artist community. My overall experience at Butler was positive. It is a PWI, and so that did influence my experience. Some of my professors were absolutely incredible. Some of them were pretty awful, I'll be honest with you. Some of them sucked. But that's just kind of the nature of getting your education, really. Not every teacher, instructor, professor is going to vibe with you the way that you want. Through that program, I got to make more connections. I got to meet Hanif Abdurraqib and other really important writers. I got to meet with agents for the first time, with editors for the first time. Got some really great advice on querying, on submitting to literary magazines. One of my favorite professors there, his name is Bryce. He and another really great professor led a workshop about submitting to literary magazines, and that changed the game for me, that workshop. It was incredible. It was so helpful. And because of the advice in that workshop in 2023, I got more publications than I've ever had. Now I'm in a doctoral creative writing program at a school in Nebraska. I haven't been saying the city that I live in Nebraska or the name of the school that I attend, but it wouldn't be very difficult for you to find if that's something that you wanted to look up. This city is a college town, and because of that, when school isn't in session, it's practically empty here. In the summer, that's really great because the streets are less congested. There's just like fucking less kids around. In the winter, it kind of makes the city creepy to me. That's how I feel. My program is pretty well known because Roxanne Gay attended my school. She didn't get her PhD at my school, but she did get her BA there. And Kwame Dawes was here until this semester, actually. Now he teaches at Brown University. We house the Willa Cather Archives. There are some other really great programs. I believe the Walt Whitman Archives are here. And we have some just really brilliant students in our department. There are so many students in our department that I just feel lucky to be able to be near and around. Unfortunately, just like at Butler, COVID really has affected the program here, and it's really diminished the sense of community. One of my really good friends in the program, we were kind of feeling the same thing, and we thought we were kind of crazy because no one else was coming up with these complaints. And then we ended up speaking to a couple of professors about it, and they voiced similar concerns. I think it's easy to feel like an English degree is great because it's general. Most of us speak English here, right? We're going to be doing business in English, and so an English degree is general enough that you can get any job that you want. But in my experience, it's more the case that an English degree is too general in order to be specifically helpful in positions. So for example, one thing that comes to mind when you think of an English major, a potential job might be a journalist. However, it's way more common for journalists to have degrees in journalism or in communications than it is for them to have an English degree. It's also easy to say, well, you have an English degree, maybe you can go be a librarian. But usually you need a degree in library science, usually a master's, in order to be a librarian. There are usually 3 paths that an English major can take in terms of their career. First is going to be education, becoming a teacher. Usually that's going to be a secondary school teacher or a college professor if you have a master's or a doctorate. You also might be able to do like some specialty jobs, some tutoring, stuff like that. But education is going to be kind of the first big path for English majors. The second path for an English major would be marketing, specifically copywriting, ad writing, newsletter writing, blog writing, SEO optimization, things like that. This is becoming more and more obsolete over time though, because of AI. A lot of people are using AI to write their marketing writing because it's easier and it's less expensive. And then the final path is creative, and that can look like several different things. So being a creative writer of some sort, poetry, fiction, nonfiction, creative nonfiction, autofiction, things like that. But also publishers, agents, editors, all of these are creative people. 9 times out of 10, if someone's an agent, they're also a writer. If someone's an editor, they're also a writer. Currently, we're seeing a lot of publishers and agents and small presses put out statements about language learning models and about how they're not interested in publishing those works. However, I do think that that will change over time, unfortunately. So why did I keep going back to school? I was in debt when I graduated with my bachelor's. Not a lot of debt, but I was in debt. And then I was in more debt with my master's, and now I'm in even more debt. So why do I keep going back to school? For a sense of stability. Writing is what I have wanted to do since I was literally 7 years old, and we had a desktop computer that for some reason my mom sat on a computer chair, so you had to sit on the floor to use the computer, and I typed up so many novel ideas. I started so many novels. I wrote so many plays. Like, I've always wanted to be a writer. I began doing some freelance work right after I finished my bachelor's, and I kept doing that into my master's until the freelance program that I was sort of working through was shut down. And then I continued to freelance sort of off on my own, and then I ended up establishing like a whole LLC for freelancing, and it was fine. I was making money from it. It took a lot of grinding, right? A lot of reaching out to companies and nonprofits, a lot of sort of convincing people why they need your services, and that part of it was fine, but I just didn't want to do the actual work. It wasn't exciting to me. It was really hard to write ad copy and newsletter copy and marketing copy because I didn't give a shit about what I was writing about. And then I joined AmeriCorps, and the Education Award paid for my entire first year of my MFA. And I figured foolishly that while I was doing the first year of the MFA, I would be working a part-time job. I was working a part-time job and a full-time job, but I figured I would work my part-time job and I would be able to save up the amount I would need for my second year of school. It's not how things happen. I'm getting my doctorate now because as I was rounding out my MFA degree, I didn't know what to do next. I was not in a great living situation. I had actually just quit my full-time job, and I was only working part-time because I was trying to make a full-time living off of my freelance writing. And like I said, it just took a lot of grinding. And what I really should have done was try to network and send cold emails and all of that for at least a year before I quit my job, but I didn't end up doing that. And so all of the money that I had saved in order to sustain myself while I was getting these freelance contracts, I blew through it very quickly. And so making a living on just my freelance writing, huge flop. After that, I tried to leverage my freelance experience to get a job for a company as a marketing writer. Huge flop, huge flop. I kept getting to the last stage of interviews, or sometimes I wouldn't get a job, but that company would reach back out to me and tell me about other positions that they would want me to apply for. I would never get those either. At that point, I was also kind of looking for a reason to leave Indianapolis. I didn't love it there. I met some great people there. Shout out to Taylor. I had some great experiences there, but it just wasn't where I wanted to be for an extended period of time. I also broke up with a guy there, and I would sometimes see him around, and I hated that. I had to go. So I ended up applying to 6 or 7 doctoral programs, and getting into a doctoral program was my plan A. I had a plan B. I do not remember what it was, but I did have one. So here are the reasons why I regret my college education. I have too much debt. I got way too much debt, baby. Y'all never getting that back. When I was applying to colleges in high school, I severely overestimated the amount of money that is available through scholarships and grants. I also really underestimated the number of people that were also applying for scholarships and grants. I ended up getting one scholarship through a local nonprofit, and then because I ended up deferring, they refused to give me the scholarship. So I ended up having to pay more out of pocket for school. And Lynchburg College was, I believe, my most affordable option. In terms of affordability and things like the FAFSA, some things were completely out of my control. I was only 18 years old, but there were definitely things that were within my control. I definitely could have taken the whole application process for scholarships and grants more seriously. I could have been more rigorous in my search for those as well. As I previously discussed, I had a really hard time getting jobs after both of my degrees, my BA and my MFA. I essentially put a little too much faith in my degree. And when I was not in school, my pay was never enough for me to be able to afford to pay student loans. Like, I was usually living paycheck to paycheck, and when I wasn't, there was a little buffer of maybe like $300 a month, maybe. Big maybe, and that usually went right into my savings account. The thing is, even though I regret taking on the debt, you can ask anyone in my life. I would love to pay my student loans back. I would love to be able to do that, but I doubt that I will, because this is an oligarchy. I do not in any way, shape, or form think that my education was a waste of money. I don't in any way, shape, or form think that the student loans that I needed to take out in order to be able to afford my education was a waste of money, but most everyone else in the country does, because this country doesn't value art, we value products. So getting an arts degree is worthless to a lot of people in this country because they aren't willing to pay for art, they're only willing to pay for products. But I just think it's one of those things where people have this conception of what an arts degree is and what an arts degree means, and they devalue it when they don't really understand it. Also, people are consuming creative writing all the time, constantly, all of the time. I spoke about this in my video about why you might want to get an MFA, and I think the insularity that an MFA program or a doctoral program provides for students is not helpful. For example, there's a lot of emphasis put on literary fiction in these programs, and then you get out into the world and no big publisher wants to acquire literary fiction. And then finally, I just think that my education could have put more emphasis on the business of being an artist. In my undergrad, we had a class called English for Life, and that was about being able to use your English degree in future positions and also just preparing for life. In that class, I learned a lot about credit and what credit cards are and how helpful they can be and how hurtful they can be. I learned a lot about credit union accounts. I learned a lot about banking, about loans, that I'd never learned in high school or in any of my other classes. However, that class didn't seem to put much emphasis on the ways that writers get paid, the different avenues or streams of income that you may be able to take advantage of with an English degree. It was more about like, this is how you apply for jobs. This is how you follow up on a job that you applied for. This is how you create a savings plan, a budget. It was more like that. At the same time, there are several things that I do not, under any circumstances, regret about my education. I do not regret treating writing like an art and not a product. I don't. I do not regret obsessing over writing. In my very first workshop class in this program, one of my classmates wrote an entire story. I want to say it was like 13 pages, and it was one sentence, very much reminiscent of the last chapter of Ulysses. And I thought it was brilliant. Another of my classmates wrote a story about a sex worker who meets a man in a sort of Pretty Woman kind of way, but then she completely subverts your expectations. It was like the most incredible thing that I think I read last year. I don't regret reading these stories. I don't regret talking with the writers about these stories and treating them as art, especially because it's so common now for some reason for readers of popular books to like hate reading just doesn't make any sense to me. And so I don't regret reading these sort of unmarketable or inefficient bodies of work when I know that they're brilliant. There's one piece that someone in my program wrote, and at the end of the scene, there was this 2-word sentence. It was just 2 words. I won't tell you what the words are, but it was so fitting. It was so perfect. Just these 2 words to end the scene that way, to have all this blank space after the 2 words, to have this huge body of text right above the 2 words. And while that sentence was a lesson in efficiency, it was also a lesson in weight and meaning. It was a very weighty sentence, a very meaningful sentence. And these are the details that I like to find. These are the details that I like to talk about. And people that are only reading Colleen Hoover, no offense to Colleen Hoover, are not going to resonate with that. I don't regret the learning. I like learning. I'm actually really worried about how I'm going to fit structured learning into my daily life when I'm finished with my doctoral degree. I'm still going back and forth about whether or not I'm going to teach at the college level after I get my degree. If I do teach, then that would open up sort of more opportunities for me to have structured learning in my schedule. I can make sure that I take a class every semester or something like that. But if I'm not teaching, which I don't want to teach, I don't really like teaching, then it would be more difficult for me to fit that time in, especially if I'm working another job that pays me way less than they should be. I don't regret the amount of time that I spent getting my degrees. I got my bachelor's in 3.5 years, I got my master's in 3 years, and this degree is going to take me 5. I don't regret that time. The years would have gone by no matter what. And so I'm happy that I was able to pass the time learning from people that I really admire, reading work that I really resonate with. I also don't regret learning about academia. If you have never attended college, or if you've attended college but you haven't been privy to faculty conversations or conversations about the bureaucracy in academia, then you have no idea. All you have to do really to understand what's happening in the bureaucracy and in faculty conversations is look around. Just look around your college campus. I'm willing to bet that whatever your equivalent of the English department is, English department, College of Arts and Sciences, school maybe of arts and sciences, wherever the English department is, literature department, I promise you that that building is not painted. I promise you that there are several things that don't work in there. I promise you that the offices don't have windows. I promise. But the School of Business, the School of Engineering, the School of Mathematics, all those are going to have the top of the line facilities, all of them. Somehow the budgets for arts are constantly getting cut, constantly getting slashed, but simultaneously there are always new buildings being put up. The engineering students are always getting a new lab or something. And I believe that this is indicative of a larger problem, which is that no one wants to pay artists. Everyone wants to pay engineers right now until they find out a more efficient way of engineering things. Everyone wants to pay people in business right now until they figure out that a bunch of people in middle management don't need to be there, or until the people that are being paid in business move to the top and then become the people that are oppressing everyone else. Even with everything that I've said in here, all of my regrets that I've aired out, I might go to school again. I am really considering going to law school. If you know me, you know that I love the legal system, not in like a go legal system kind of way. I just love working to understand complex things, and the legal system is one of those things. Lawyers also make a lot of money. One of my cousins is a lawyer. She's passed the bar in 3 states. She makes tons of money. However, I would only attend law school if I had a tangible plan for paying back my student loan debt, and I could in some way, shape, or form go to law school without paying any additional money. If I were to get a stipend or something like that, then I would do it. But I haven't done much research about law school. I'm not planning to until maybe 2027, when I'm getting close to finishing my degree. If you have a lot of student loan debt, if you are a liberal arts graduate, don't be discouraged. Or maybe be discouraged, actually. Maybe be discouraged. I think the way that the world feels about art and compensating artists and writers is one of the main reasons that I try not to put goals in place that are dependent on the outside world. I want to get an agent, I want to publish books, all of that stuff. But in terms of my goals for the writing itself, it's never about something that someone else can give me. It's never about certain people buying my book or achieving however many sales. It's about the writing itself and how it makes me feel. Because the most valuable thing about your writing is the way that it makes you feel. Chances are you're not going to sell a lot of copies, and that's okay. Chances are you are going to be one of the losing people. I don't think that's okay, but I do think that it's manageable. I do think that through finding community with other writers, other artists, other people in similar situations, you can develop a support system that values you and what you bring to the world.